back, and if you're just joining us, we're continuing part 2 of our conversation with representatives of the Public Service Union and the Belize National Teachers Union as we talk about the current impasse that is taking place in looking at how we reduce the wage bill and be able to survive the economic crisis brought on by COVID-19. We have with us Dean Flowers, who's the first vice president, and the PR officer for the PSU, and Senator Elena Smith, who's the president of the BNTU. Now, we spoke before the break about some of the proposals, and really only some, because there's much more that we haven't gotten into as yet, that you have put forward to via the financial secretary, looking at how you can be of assistance and get more clarity as to the cost-saving measures government is undertaking. The critical issue here is looking at the foregoing of the increments. And before we went to the break, you clarified that you would prefer to have a deferral where for 3 years or 5 years you don't get your increment, but then you're able to collect upon it with no back pay. Now let's flip to the other side. Let's explore what the government is proposing they will do to be able to save costs. And of course, the most controversial one is looking at those allowances, the housing and entertainment monthly allowance of $1,600 and telephone allowance of $1,000, both monthly, in addition to the salaries, that they are willing to take half of the allowances and several other measures, but I'll have you explain them. Dean?
As the Prime Minister explained on the letter state, that is what they're prepared to give up, which, as our position is that it's simply not enough. We must also bear in mind that in addition to those allowances that you spoke of, government ministers also receive a motor vehicle allowance of $1,300. Okay, CEOs as well. There are those who may be assigned a government vehicle, or there are those who may say, well, give me the allowance and I'll use my personal vehicle. Then before you know it, they commandeer a government vehicle. So again, it's another form of double dipping by them. And so it doesn't matter how you paint the picture, Marlene. We can pretty much assume that when you look at a 1 month salary and the 50% cut in these different allowances, that these ministers would be giving up around $6,000, $7,000. But I can tell you that within 5 or 6 years, a junior public officer would have given that. So what we're pushing for is equity. We must have equity where these matters are concerned. And like I said, for us, it's not about making a sacrifice. I want to make clear it's not about making a sacrifice. We're amenable to make any sacrifice, whether it's a deferment or a foregone, as long as there's equity and fairness. But at this point in time, that is not being offered to us, and so we will have to continue the negotiation until we can reach a middle ground.
Now, I'm trying to be clear here that it's not that they won't give up anything. They're giving up half of these 2 allowances, because you're saying there's also a vehicle allowance that wasn't mentioned. So they're giving up half of the housing and entertainment allowance, so that's $800, and I think it's half of the telephone allowance, which means they'll give up $500, right?
Yeah.
And they're also giving up the ministers 1 month's salary.
One time.
One time, 1 month salary. And what else?
That's it. So.
And they only have a few more months left in office.
I'm not saying that they're not giving up something, Marlene. I'm saying that what they are giving up does not equate to what public officers will be giving up. Okay, that's a one-time contribution. It would be easier for me as a senior public officer to give up 1 month's salary than to give up one year increment. It would be easier for me to give up a month's salary than give up a year increment. And so that is exactly what is happening here. They're giving up 1 month's salary coupled with some allowances, and then they're coming to us and say, we want you to give up. And I'm not advocating here that public officers be asked to give up 1 month's salary. I'm just saying it would be cheaper in the long run for us to do that. And that is exactly what these guys are doing. Even if you were to take that minister $6,000 and $7,000 and invest it, the best paying credit union or best paying bank out there, in 5 years they would still not equate what one junior public officer to give up. So equity needs to be achieved, and along with that, we must address fixing the problem of wastage. Because let's speak about the $1,000 phone package. Now, I don't know what kind of calls these ministers make and what kind of service they require, but my leave package cost me for $1.50. And Marlene, I have all the data. I will never be able to use in 1 month. I could make all the calls. It might cost me a little extra couple dollars if I do and leave it at roaming international, but I surely can get by, as I'm quite sure any minister can get by, with $200 or $300 in telephone allowance. There is absolutely no need for $1,000. And one of the things that I want to make clear, during the break you spoke about the allowances are earned by public officers after years of service and putting in work. Man, we're talking about ministers here who do not have to exhibit any kind of qualification, any kind of training, any kind of experience that the police receptionists have to exhibit, including a mathematics CXC pass and an English CXC pass. And what we do with that poorly public officer, we pay her $700 or $800 a month. And he had to go through an interviewing process. He had to show that she has the requisite qualification, experience, training, and ability to do that job as a receptionist. And then we turn around and we pay a minister $81,000 base salary, and he doesn't exhibit any ability, any experience, any formal training to be able to get the job done. And then we turn around and say to that public officer, we want you to sacrifice 1 year increment, and we will give up 1 month's salary. The comparison is unequitable. It is unfair. It's a shame that we're having this discussion, man. We shouldn't even be having this discussion.
So what are you saying? You want them to give up more? You want them to perhaps look at, I mean, what is your proposal moving forward? Because I hear what you're saying. I think again, I say, if you put it on the balance scale, it's as easy to see that it's a bigger sacrifice. But what are you proposing? Because simply saying they make a big salary and they have a lot of allowances, I think, everybody can see that. But what would you like to see is taking place from their end that would make you feel that the sacrifice you and all the public officers and all the teachers, and this of course includes your nurses, your lab techs, your everybody, that it will be okay for you to take your cut as well. What do you want to see from their end?
From an equity standpoint, Marlene, if we were to look at a junior public officer who's on pay scale 1, and let's put him at 20 years old, and see how much money over the long run he would be foregoing, and I probably have something here if you allow me to just let me see. Yeah. So if we look at a junior officer who would be giving up 20 years of increment, that officer would be giving up $19,000 over those 20 years. If the minister would have come to me and say, I'm giving up $20,000 or $19,000, then that would be equity on my, when I compare that with my lowest public officer. But They're not saying that. So what we're saying is the maximum that a junior public officer should be required, or public officers should be required to forgo the increment is 5 years. Because in 5 years you would have achieved what you're giving up. So let we bring on a little bit of equality because we have never achieved equity. So let we bring on a little bit of equality to the table. After 5 years, we would have contributed the exact same amount, if not more. In my case, as a senior public officer and others, we would have been giving up more. In 5 years, we would have given up more than these ministers are giving up. So we're saying, let we get back this increment in a 5 years, because from an equality standpoint, we would have contributed the same to trying to help fix the financial situation of this country. But you cannot expect me to, after 5 years, continue to carry this burden. When you're in retirement after 8 years, as Sister Elena said, or after 2 terms, and then I am struggling to reach 15 years, and I still have to carry this burden. It doesn't add up, and it's not fair. And I hope that they see it for what it is, that it's an unreasonable request of public officers.
And I think, Marlene,
yes.
I think that is why it is important, because if you noted, the Prime Minister kept pounding on the amount that they will be giving up compared to the rest of us, our measly. And so, for example, quickly, when you look at the allowance, those 2 allowances that we spoke about, the 1,600 and the 1,000. A teacher who is on pay scale 5 would have gone 20 years on that scale, 20 years of receiving increment on pay scale 5. And at that point, if that teacher doesn't qualify any further, that teacher her salary would be 2,280, less than an allowance. A teacher who
after 20 years of service.
Right, because remember, every year you get an increment. So we have to keep in mind that giving up my increment this year that I already earned, this is not what I am supposed to get, this is what I already worked for, because I worked for it last year, it is being paid this year. Yeah. So I already worked for that increment, and giving that up means that this year, I am not going to be moving any step up on my pay scale, because that is going to be taken away. So I won't be moving up. So that same teacher whose salary is starting at 1,064 and goes to the maximum of 2,280 would be giving up $65 per month in increment. That is that teacher's increment, $65 per month. In 10 years, that teacher will be giving up $7,910. In 15 years, when that teacher is eligible for gratuity and pension, that teacher would have given up $11,865, and in 20 years, $15,820 that teacher would have given up over those years. When we look at, as Baradine said, the politicians can get gratuity and pension after 2 terms in office. Only 2 terms in office. We have to wait for at least 15 years, because if you leave after 10 years, you will only get a pension. But if you leave after 15 years, then you qualify for gratuity and your pension. Now imagine the salary that we are getting. And let us look again, and as Brother Dean keeps saying, it's not just about the increment or the figures, but because that is what is being put out there to make us seem as if though we are being mean, we have to then show our numbers as well. When you look at the fact that the teachers, for example, you get $1,064 for your salary, or let us go to a pay scale 8, which might be the most common salary scale, $1,589 per month. Of that $1,589, you take monies from that, $1,000, $1,500 sometimes, it depends on which scale you are on. You take monies out of your salary to fix up your classroom, to buy everything for your class, to buy your marker, buy your book, buy your everything. Imagine a teacher getting that salary per month, having to spend his or her own money to do the job. The only government paid employee who must find his or her tools to do his or her job with that kind of salary. And we don't get no kind of additional nothing to say as teachers, because you are always giving, we will give you an responsibility allowance or something to that effect. Yeah. In opposition to that, we see where our teachers have lost some of their hardship allowances that they used to get because there was a change in how these schools were being placed in categories. So it is just to show that while it's not all about the money,
Yeah.
it's just to show that, to put out there to the public to say that we are giving so much, that we are giving a measly contribution towards what they are getting. It doesn't paint a true picture.
And let's speak, and I think this is the inequity that you speak of, because it is offensive to call it measly. And I think that if you think $65 may be dispensable to some, $65 may be dispensable to some people, but to someone who is collecting, you said the monthly salary of $1,500, for example, an extra 65 can cover some of your utility bills.
Exactly.
And it's one less thing to worry about. So it's not a matter of looking, you can't, we all value money differently. And it's all
Right.
dependent on how much we receive, because that really tends to become our marker.
Yeah.
So true.
Yes, and I just wanted to very briefly raise sort of a practical concern, in the sense that, and I'm paraphrasing now, the government, to say that what it has been said that what we're facing right now in terms of a financial crisis is almost unprecedented. And for example, we have already seen that the tax revenues which were collected in the last month have been way below what is really needed to meet a lot of what are the government's existing financial obligations. Now, when I'm talking about practicality, I'm just I'm hoping you can elaborate a little bit more on how the practicality and how perhaps you would intend or suggest that the evaluation or the exercise in terms of looking at the salaries and you know, whatever sort of financial benefits all of these workers, if we're talking, because we're talking about a big pool now, if we're talking about from the ministers to foreign service officers, and so when, you know, next week, next month, the government, I would imagine, would respond to say that, well, we have all of these existing financial obligations. You may have valid points, but how can we go through this exercise in a time when we have to pay people next week, or we have to pay people, so, and we're already not, we don't have enough of what we need. So can you comment a little bit on how you would suggest, or what your view is on the practicality of your suggestions?
Okay, well, firstly, I want to thank you for asking that question, because I think it's a very important question, and it's very relevant to the conversation, because increments for public officers are not paid at the beginning of the year, or at the middle of the year, or at the end of the year. It's paid across the year when your anniversary comes up. So I say that to say that the 17 million that they're targeting, and whatever value, the 3 to 5% of that I understand the increment may account for, is not an immediate saving. So when the FinSec came to us, and when we received his first email in March, it was that the government needs to realize some immediate savings. Now, if you're talking about increment, then I think we can all agree that that wouldn't necessarily be an immediate savings. Because myself, I'm not doing an increment anytime soon. So clearly something is wrong when the government is saying it is in an effort to realize immediate savings. We're saying we know, we have suggestions how you can realize immediate savings. When I look at the increment issue and I look at contract officers issue, we may very well be able to save more if we start eliminating those contract officers whose contracts are expiring during the course of this year, rather than waiting for our public officers' increment date to be realized. Let's not forget that as of March 2019, 495 people accounted for $20 million alone. $20 million, 495 people.
Now,
Of
you,
that
you, you
much-
can, I mean, it's easy to say get rid of the contract officers, but you also need to know who's needed and who perhaps there is already a paid position that exists that could do the work.
Well, yes, you can make that argument, but I can also say to you that if you're not from a technical grade, as the regulation it clearly states, you ought not to be considered for a contract. Why is it that the financial secretary is issuing contracts to drivers? Why is it that the financial secretary is issuing contracts to accounts clerks in the Ministry of Finance? Why is he bringing, if you look at the Ministry of Finance alone, you'd be shocked to learn the amount of contract officers that are in there. You mean to tell me that for all the years that the financial secretary has been there, that for all the years that the Ministry of Public Service has been in existence, no one had any vision to do any succession planning? You mean to tell me that everybody in the Ministry of Finance will be another G and Gandhi? That despite the age that he accumulated over the wonderful service that he provided to this country, we'll have a bunch of 70 and 80-year-olds dragging themselves to work? Man, where is the meaningful contribution that these people will be able to make in the long run? I think that it is no fault of us again that the Ministry of Finance is one ministry, it's a classical ministry that has done poor succession planning. And so I am not saying that we need to rid ourselves of these contract officers tomorrow. I am saying let's look at the list. Where secretaries are concerned, where clerks are concerned, where office assistants are concerned, I mean, let's see how we can weed them out immediately, because people are in the service that can do that job. And where the technical grades are concerned, let's look within the system to start grooming our people and preparing our people to assume these positions. So these are areas whereby we could realize immediate savings. And I want the general public to know that when you bring one driver or an office assistant or a clerk on contract, that person immediately earns much more than a regular public officer who is on a pay scale or on a pay grade. Automatically earn much more, salary-wise as well as with gratuities and possible benefits. So those are areas of immediate savings that we can address. We can address the issue of rental. I would like to know, why is it that the financial secretary supported the moving of the immigration department out of a government-owned building at the end of this month when we're trying to realize savings in Belize City, out of the Charles Bartlett High building? They were removed to go and pay rent. Why? Why are we doing things like this and we're talking about public officers, please make one sacrifice? Then all that we're trying to do is to see how we can continue to enrich our friends, our cronies. Why is it that the bulk of government ministries are currently sitting in Asian buildings? It's like, is that the new norm that we rent from Asians? Why is it that the government has not taken $20 million and build a nice building to start housing these ministries? I mean, and that's in the long term.
Yeah.
That's not an immediate cost saving, but I'm saying as we speak, the government is moving departments and ministries out of government-owned buildings and putting them in rented spaces.
Yeah.
These things are unacceptable. As we speak, the Prime Minister said there will be a moratorium on new employment. Yet we're seeing that they continue to employ people. So as far as we're concerned, it's a facade, basically, what the picture that is trying to be painted out there about government seriousness, about addressing the shortfall deficit. I would like to know, how will we address the tax evasion that also has us here? Like I said, nobody is calling out the private sector. Public sector fund is paying private sector wage as we speak. But is the private sector doing what they ought to be doing to contribute their fair share? They're not. 52% shortfall, and nobody wants to speak about the private sector and neglecting its responsibility to pay its taxes. I don't have an option. I pay 25% off the top. I don't get to see. So when we talk about realizing immediate savings, I can tell you, we can identify those areas of immediate savings. We're not in that privileged group that gets paid in lieu of vacation. I would never get paid in lieu of vacation. I don't have blue eyes. So there's only a selected few that deliberately run up their vacation leave, and then they go to the Ministry of Finance who approve these things. So
let me bring it back. Let me bring it back for a second, because we're going to run out of time, and I want to get a clear vision forward. Tomorrow, you have a meeting where you are expected to be able to work out an arrangement that will be beneficial. What I hear is, and you know, let's be honest. The wastage that you speak of is one that we've been speaking about long before COVID. And the plea from the unions has been for a long time about disclosing information so we can be that you can give better suggestions as to how government can be more prudent in how they're using our public funds. But going back to tomorrow, there is an immediate challenge on the table. There has to be a way that the government can afford to pay the wage bill and the other bills. And they're asking you to agree to this increment, to giving up this increment for 1 year. Tell me, what are your expectations going in tomorrow? It sounds to me that you're very clear that you will not accept the proposal on the table, but there probably is going to be the expectation of some sort of compromise.
From a PSU standpoint, we were hoping that the Prime Minister has taken the time out to look at the presentations that we've been making since his press conference, that he will look at the bigger picture and understand that perhaps he didn't have at his disposal all the information that was relevant to him making the sort of declarations that he made. Perhaps the Financial Secretary failed to properly advise him. We're hoping that we could have a discussion surrounding our presentation and his thoughts on that, because as I said, if it is that our contribution will be just a tiny drop in the bucket, then I cannot understand why the Prime Minister will go to great lengths to threaten to go to the Governor General simply to retrieve that tiny and measly contribution. It makes no sense. So I am hoping now that we've put forward our position in terms of the numbers, that he would reconsider his position. So, and like I said, I am also really hoping that he will say to us, and that he will instruct the Ministry of Finance to put together a working group or a working committee to immediately start effecting cost savings measures.
But can we be practical though? There probably is no time to gather a group and work out solutions collectively. Are you going to the table with definitive suggestions as to what you would want to see from the government side that they do? You're saying what they're offering is not enough, it's not equitable, in other words, it's not fair, but do you have in your mind, either the BNTU, the PSU, or collectively, what you would like to suggest from them moving forward?
But Marlene, I think that is where those cost-saving measures come in, and it's not something that they don't already have. They have had these things for some years now. This is not the first committee that has worked on these things, and the committees use their books to come up with the suggestions or proposals that they have come up with. It's just that the government has not done its part to really ensure that those things are implemented. So we are not starting from scratch. It's not something that will take them some months to deal with. They can address those matters almost immediately. Okay. So for me, it's about us being able to share with them our positions. And maybe it is that, as Baradine has said, maybe it is that the Prime Minister has not been given a clear picture of our reaction or counter proposal to their proposal, and maybe in sitting down and going through and explaining that to the Prime Minister, then he would have a better understanding of where we are coming from, and he would see that this is not about us not wanting to do our part. This is just about us ensuring, as we said before, ensuring that as a country, we don't have to get to this point again next year or 2 years from now when another disaster or another pandemic comes, that we are able to put things in place to be able to meet when that time comes. Marlene, I have to say this, we have not even gotten to a final decision as yet as it relates to this matter in terms of, say, what is going to be the final take on it. Yet we have from our end, and I have to say the name, we have been informed by some of our members that St. Ignatius High School has already deducted from those teachers' salaries when we have not even concluded this matter as yet. So, I guess because they're hearing that the Prime Minister is saying certain things, that they are just going through and they're just abiding and not even waiting to see if this matter has been finalized. So I just want to point out that from our end, we are willing. That is why we requested a meeting, because we want to have the discussion so that we can, for us as BNTU, we can share with our members, listen, this is the situation, these are the positions, we have no choice, we have to do X, Y, or Z, or this is what we can do. Which would you prefer? That is what we want to come out with, that we can share with our members definitively what's the information, what are the positions, and then we can make our decision to say, yes, this is how we are going to sacrifice. Yeah. We are willing, but the issue is how or at what point.
Yeah. All right. Well, we thank you for sharing your position this morning, and of course, we'll keep following the story.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
All right. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and we will be back in a few. Stay tuned.
This COVID update was brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price, but stay for the service.